Hello, and welcome to this webinar on Advanced Manufacturing Solution for SAP Business One, BEAS. My name is Kevin Solanki. So let's just quickly talk about what is BEAS. BEAS is a advanced manufacturing solution from Boyum IT. Many of you may be familiar with the other solutions on offer from Boyum, which are the usability pack and print and delivery. They also are the providers of an advanced WMS system called Progimex WMS, plus a lightweight scanning solution for the warehouse in Progimex Scan. Today we'll be looking at an overview of the key features of BEAS. So start with, why would you consider an advanced manufacturing system? You may be already using standard SAP Business One production module and you've explored its capabilities and it does not cover all your requirements. By the way, we've previously done a webinar on the standard production module in SAP, and you can find this on our YouTube channel if you want to go through that. So back to the question of why would you look at an advanced module? Well, here are some of the reasons. So firstly, you may want the ability to define BOM revisions or versions of the same product having different components and bills of materials and routings. You may have the need to define alternate products within your BOMs. You may have more detailed quality control processes and traceability requirements. Your product costing requirements are, beyond what standard SAP Business One offers. You may have a greater requirement around MRP processes, including the ability to, consider resources and routes as part of that. You want better controls over your subcontract to manufacturing. You may have, more detailed planning and scheduling requirements around your production. You may have shop floor control requirements. So these are some of the sort of reasons why people would consider a more advanced manufacturing system. So to start, let's have a quick look at how BEAS fits into the SAP Business One solution. So just if you can see here, anything in that sort of light yellow block is standard SAP function. Anything in the orange block is functionality that comes with the BEAS basic license or the core BEAS functionality. And then the green, the items in the green box are additional modules that are available with your BEAS product. So if you can look here, you see the standard sort of functions that come with the BEAS Basic include the MRP, manufacturing management, capacity planning, product costing, subcontracting, quality control, and traceability. And then the additional modules are production data collection, advanced planning and scheduling, plant maintenance, as well as there's some capabilities around mobility and RF devices. So let's quick look at some of the areas we are going to cover. This is an overview session. I mean, to cover each one of these topics in detail is a session on its own, but this is just to give you an idea of what is possible. And if you are interested in knowing further, then certainly get in touch with your consultant or your account manager, or even with our marketing team, and we can arrange for some further information to be, or further sessions to be arranged for you. Okay, so let's now go into the product and have a look at what you've got. So I'm looking at SAP Business One with the BEAS add-on running, right? So if you look on the left side, you'll see that there's some additional menu items that are not part of what you'd not normally expect to see when you're running standard SAP Business One. You see here things like pre-calculation. You see even when you go inside, for example, inventory management, you can see there's some additional menu items in here. Even if you look at capacity planning, product configurator, factory data capture. So there's a lot more functionality added onto the system, and it's all tightly integrated into the SAP menu systems. Separately to that, there is also a terminal that you can have for users to log in and you know, perform tasks on the shop floor. So that's the terminal. So you can have a screen on the factory floor, and people can, you know, touch screen interface to process various transactions. And then the other interface you've got is the terminal, or rather the RF-based terminal. This is a browser-based application, responsive UI. So it could be on a scanner, or it could be on a touchscreen type device. Right, so as you see, when I resize the screen, it sort of collapses and repositions the functions that are available. So going back into SAP again. So let's run through what enhancements are there around your product master or item master data. So I'm going to go into the stock management, and I'll just open up the item master to start with. And if I just open up this item, the first thing you'll notice is there's a whole heap of additional user-defined fields available. Now, this is the standard SAP screen, but if you right-click on the item master and go into the item master extended option, immediately now another screen opens up, and this is your BEAS item master screen, right? It's got all the standard SAP fields, plus it's got some additional fields. So when we look at your general tab, you can see that's all the things that were in your general tab anyway. But if you look here, you've got things like what is the breakdown of this particular item, and that's to do with whether the bill of material will explode or not when you create a production order. There's the administration, which we'll look at a bit later. There's, you know, production unit of measure. What is the lot size? What is the issue method? It's got the ability for you to define scrap percentages. And if you then look at the purchasing, sales tabs are all pretty standard. You've got the inventory data, which is also standard. And then you come to the calculation field. Now, this is where you can do, you know, product calculation. There's a very detailed calculation capabilities in here, which we'll look at a bit later on in this session. Then you've got properties, remarks, attachments, they're all standard. And then you've got parameter and variance, and these give you the ability to create some configured products and put some logic into how things hang together. So back to the general tab. If you notice up the top, you've got the master data, and then you've got a few other tabs going across. So you got the bill of material. So this is where you define what components are used to make this particular finished product. And you can define also product versions. So if you have multiple versions of a product, then you can say which version is the one that will be used in this particular bill of material. And if I then double click on that line, I can see a bit more information, a bit more detail about the bill of material component. In this case, we're saying we're using 35 kilos per 100 kilo finished product. And then we can have a fixed quantity surcharge. So let's say, you know, to start with, I have to use 5 kilos of product to just get the production process started. I can have scrapping percentages. I can have rounding. You know, and there's a lot more information, a lot more capability here as well around the bill of material. Then if we go into the routing tab, so routing is where you define which machines, what operations are going to be run to complete this particular production. So, you know, what we're looking at here is a bill of material to create a shortbread plain cookie, which, you know, in this case, we've got a bunch of ingredients, and then we've got a bunch of steps including some mixing, laminating, molding, baking, cooling, packing. And once again, each one of these operations, there's a set, you can have define a setup time and a production time. So if I drill into this first item, I can see here that the setup time is 20 minutes, and then the runtime is 30 minutes, and it's 30 minutes to produce 500 units or 500 kilos. So there's a lot of detail on how you set this up. And then if you look at alternative, you can also define if there is an alternate resource that can be used if this particular resource is not available, you can also define that. Now, if I go into the actual resource, I can then define, the calendar for the resource, what the hours it's running, what the capacity is, what the cost elements are. So it's, there's a lot of detail you can capture around the resources as well. And then the type of operation. So, what is this? Is it a external process? Is this a machine? Is this a labor element? So all of these things you can define for the routing and for the resource. And then there are two other tabs here. One is configurator, which is something we're going to look at a bit later on, and then quality control. So this is where you define what QC processes are applicable on this particular product. So in this case, there's a inspection plan, and in the inspection plan, we're doing some weighing and checking. And if I go into the actual inspection plan, you'll see what we're doing is measuring a couple of things. One is the packaging and the other is the weight. So once more, there's a lot of detail that you can define. We can say, the package needs to be between 15 and 18 kilos, otherwise it won't pass QC checks. That's an example of a sort of QC check you can define. So what we'll do now is, the other thing around quality control is that it can also be linked to a route position. So, QC operations can be linked to a route, not necessarily just at the end of the production process. So here I could go in and assign for the mixing process a QC check as well. And then at that point, it would automatically generate a QC order. Okay, so from here, let's now look at a different view of the same item, right? So we've been looking at the extended view of the item. The other view that's possible is the structure view. Now, if we move into the structure view, now you see the same item, but now you're seeing it in a hierarchical manner. All these components, these are all the bills of material components. And what you'll notice is that one of the components has its own bill of material. So you can have, a tree structure and you'll see the full hierarchy of that particular bill of material. And then further down, we've got the resources or routings, and you can see that if there's an alternate route, you can clearly see that as well. And here you'll see this component. There is an alternative item you've got available for it. So if I clicked on that, I can see, okay, if I don't have my plain flour, I can use as an alternative a grain flour, and this would be available or visible when I raise the production order, and I could change the component or the material to be used. All right, so what we've been looking at so far is sort of normal bills of materials. What we'll do next is look at a bill of material that's got multiple versions. Okay, so we'll look at this item here. It's another shortbread cookie. This time it's apricot flavor. And if I went and looked at the extended view, firstly, one of the things you'll observe is that there is no bill of material and no routing tab now. And the reason is I've set this up to say in the administration, I've said that this item has separate bills of materials, right, based on versions. rather than default. So because of that, those two tabs have disappeared, but what you've got here is those versions, right? I've got two versions, and if I click onto the version, I can see that the first version is released, and it's got its own bill of material and its routing. The second version is under construction, and it's got its own bill of materials and routings. And you've got a lot of control in terms of those statuses and how they impact, how that particular version of the BOM can be or cannot be used. Right. So there's the setup. You can have under construction. You can create your own version statuses as well, but the standard ones that come, construction, inspection, release, run out, and locked. And depending on the status, you can then say what activities you can perform on that particular version of the BOM. Okay. So if we come back into the bill of materials here, now if I drill in and go into that BOM, you can see that's the same item. There's the link routing, and there's the bills of materials. So it's made up of these components. And let's say we're now trialing something, and we're going to make a small adjustment. We're going to start using, a different type of flour. So then we have got a second bill of material that's under construction. If I go and look at that bill of material, I can see that the main difference is that we're going to use grain flour instead of plain flour to make this item. And likewise, same thing with the routing. We could have a different routing process for that particular bill of material. Okay, now we're going to have a look at an item that is set up as a configurator. So BEAS allows you to create a product configurator where the person is expected to answer a series of questions, and then the result is a bill of material for that particular version, and it also then works out the pricing and costing of that item. So it's going to find the item in question. So there we go. This particular item, if I then go into the item master extended and look at the configurator tab, right? So in here, we've got, a number of different parameters that need to be defined, and this is the setup of that. So, we've got to define the sizes, we've got to define the components, and then, there'd be within the components, there's a main structure and then a cover, and you can see that there's selections of drop downs or radio boxes, and so on. And if I then just said, let's test this, you'll see this has resulted in a configuration screen similar to this, where I can go in and say, the length is 10, the width is 10, the main components are, it's structure type 1, and you can see there's different pricing for different types of structures. And because I've picked structure 1, then I've got the option to pick either cover type 1 or 3. And so it's fairly powerful, fairly configurable. And then you've got, going to the production, you can say, well, I want to use, which resource I'm going to use, and do I need to create a quality control process on this operation? So all of those things together then give us a final sell price. And you can also review the definition and create a new product code for this. So the product configurator, it's a lot of capabilities around the configuration, and there's also a web-based interface into that. I'm just going to leave it at that for now. So the other thing with product configurator is that when you are entering a sales order, so we'll just do a new one. And when you select the item, one of the things you can do from there is go right click and say let's do a new configuration. And that sort of gives you that particular interface that we saw before. You select the options, and then it can push the price back into the actual sales order itself. Okay, so what we'll do now is go back into the item master and look at the calculations and how the system can help you arrive at a rolled up standard cost. So I've got this item here, which is set up to be standard costed. If I go into the bill of material now and go into the calculations area, I can see that there's a schema that's attached to this. There's a calculation schema called standard. What does this schema do? Let's have a look. So this schema has the following costing elements, and again, each one of those costing elements can be defined. You can have markups from one costing element to the next to come all the way down to a sell price, right? So you start with your material costs. So you got your direct material costs, you got your labor and material, and then you get a cost of sales. From there, you can add other costs elements, get to your cost of sales, specify your profit margin, and then from there you get your net sales price, any other discounts, and so on. So very detailed, very powerful costing scenarios and methods. So what you can then do is you can run this. You can say, well, I want to do my costing. The costing's based on 1,000 kilo batch, and if I run the calculation, basically the system comes up and shows me how it's arriving at a cost, right? It's doing the full cost analysis. You've got your direct material costs, you've got your labor and material costs, and then the COGS, and you can see how you get to a sale price. So this is just sort of doing simulation to work out what the costings are. So you could quickly whip up a bill of material and just do some costing on it without even having created a finished product. And then from here, if you were looking at costing of an item that's actually held in stock, let's say you run standard costs in your system, and once a year or once every 6 months you revise and review your standard costs, and the whole costing module allows you to generate the new costs and then even finalize the revaluation. So in this pre-calculation module, I can go into this batch calculation. I can run a particular calculation schema. And once you've run the calculation, you can review the calculation results if you wish to, which just shows you how it's arrived at the various components of the cost element. And then from there, you can click on the revaluation and decide on which one of these cost elements you're going to use to revalue the stock. Right, so you've got full ability to control what the costing is going to be. Right. Okay, so from here, so that's the cost calculation sort of for your materials and for your finished products. But once you've run the production, you can then review and do some analysis on actuals versus planned as well, and that happens through the production module. So if I go into the production area now, and if I open up the work orders, so BEAS doesn't use standard SAP production orders. You could see that the bills of materials and the routing is a lot more detailed, and standard SAP doesn't have that capability. So what you'd have, same you'd have additional details that get translated into a work order. So if I just go find a work order that we've already previously completed, and then we can perform some cost analysis on them. So you go search, and I'm looking for production order number 57. So there it is. And if I do product cost analysis, and let's say I want to see the planned versus actual, let's start the costing analysis. And now I see all, firstly, I see how many were made. I also can see, there were 2 receipts done to produce the item. I planned to make 1,000, I made 800. There's the actual material cost, that's the planned material cost. There's the actual duration of work done, and that was the planned duration. And then you can see the total overall actual versus budget. And you can see all the transactions that were done, and full costing analysis again. So once if you've done some production run, you can go back retrospectively and analyze how you went against what your planned quantities were and what your planned hours were. All right. What we'll do now is look at a function called capable to promise. So on a sales order, when you are taking the customer's order, one of the things you can do is go in and look at when you'd be able to produce or deliver the product that the customer is ordering. Now this is, you got standard SAP, you've got available to promise. The available to promise is just considering what's coming in, what's going out, and what actual work orders are in the system or production orders in the system. This takes it a level beyond that. It considers raw material stock. It considers the resources and their availability, and then it tells you when you may be able to deliver the quantity being ordered. So if I right click and I say, show me the capable to promise. And in this case, on my sales order, I said I wanted it, the customer's wanting it on the 2nd of October. However, when I look at the capable to promise, I can see that realistically we can only complete it on the 6th, and we're allowing for 2 days of time to get it out to the customer. So realistic date is the 8th of October. And how is it arriving at that? Well, it's looking at the actual resources that are required in this production process, and well, it's basically saying, well, the resource is not going to be freed up till the 10th or the 4th of October anyway, and then from the 4th of October it's going to run, it's a couple of days of mixing, then a few hours of molding, and then another few hours of baking, and so the earliest it's going to finish is on the 10th. So that's on the resources part. And then if you scroll down, it also shows us the materials that are required and whether we've got enough stock to handle that load. So it's saying requirement is 200. We've got 52 in stock. So that item's okay. Most of these items are okay. And then further down here, we've got salt, which has a lead time of 3 days. So we don't have enough stock, but we've got enough time to get it in. And this item here, it's a manufactured item, lead time of 5 days. We've probably got a slightly bigger problem because we also need to produce this, and we may not be able to produce this in time. So considering all those things, the earliest you can deliver is the 8th of October. And it is fairly dynamic. So this was capable to promise calculations based on a quantity of 10,000. If I reduce this to 1,000 and I run the same capable to promise again, you'll see that it's now giving us a different date. Now it's saying, well, you can deliver this on the 5th rather than on the 10th. So it is it is considering all the data that's already existing in the system. All right. So the other thing is, once you've created a sales order, if it was a make to order type scenario, you can go into this, right click on the sales order, and then there is an option to create a new work order. So you could do a make to order type scenario from a sales order by just simply right clicking and saying create the production order. So that's one way of raising the production order. The other two ways of raising production orders is, you obviously can manually create one. And the third way of doing it is via MRP. You can run the MRP and then generate the production orders through that. So before we move on to looking at production orders, one last thing I want to show is this screen called the item structure. This shows us all the products in the system, and if they've got a bill of material, it also shows us the hierarchy of the structure. So if you remember, we had that one item which had two versions or two revisions, and those two revisions had their own bills of materials. If I expand on it, I can see those two revisions, 0001 and 002. One is, got a thumb, which is, it's released. The other one's in construction, and I can expand on both of those, and I can see the full detailed bill of material for both versions of that. All right, now we're going to move into a production or creating a work order. So you're in that list of work order screen. We can right click and say add a new work order. And then within a single work order, you can have what we call positions, and you can have multiple positions. So we can have, you could end up with maybe 5 different positions for the same item because you've got a batch, you're batching it. So even though let's say you want to produce 10,000, but you can only produce in batches of 2,000, then the system will generate 5 positions on the work order so that you can then create and produce them one batch at a time. So let's create a work order, and let's just say we're going to make 10 of these. Okay, so that generates the work order. And so if you then went onto the work order, just expand on it, you can see the position and you can see the full detail of what's going into making it. You can also highlight the line and print the work order or the job traveler. So what that allows you to do is you can print it out, you can give it to the factory can then use this to produce, and you'll see it's got all the components, plus it's got all the routings, and these are all in barcoded format, because what you can then do is use the terminals and allow the employees or the workers in the factory to clock on, clock off a particular work order. Okay, so that's where this job traveler gets used. So that's how you create one manually, and then obviously finally you can also create one via the MRP. So let's quickly do an MRP run, and then we'll come back and look at how you record production and issue components and all those things. So the MRP module has got 2 parts. So the first part, forecast, is what you do in standard SAP. So this is no different to what you'd see in the standard SAP forecast screen. Then you've got the MRP visit. Now this is a bit different from what you've got with standard SAP. You've got the ability to define quite a few more parameters and filters. And there's a lot more configuration you can do around the various options. So there's quite a few parameters, and you can go through and select or deselect the appropriate ones based on what you're trying to achieve. And then you obviously can also select the warehouses that are applicable in the process. So once you've done all your configuration, you can then calculate or run the calculation for MRP. That'll go through all the products that have been selected and for the MRP run based on the parameters. And then if you look at the order recommendations, it'll show you all the things that need to be produced or ordered depending on what either make items or purchased items. And you see, as you highlight different rows, the bottom left quadrant shows you different information about that item, what the demands are, what the supply is on that item, and you could essentially go in there and create production orders or purchase orders depending on the type of item it is. But you've also got the ability to generate bulk production or create purchase orders and production orders in batch from this screen. So if I go back and change the mode, and let's say we're going to create purchase orders for our buy items, and I click on pre-assign. And what that does is it filters the list to just buy items, and it's also put the quantities in against each item, right? So each one of those items based on the required quantities is already pre-populated. From there, I can go in and say I want to raise purchase requests. And then, if I'm happy with what it's suggesting, I click on the create purchase order field, and it'll create that, this whatever number of purchase orders required based on the suppliers that are on those particular items. Same thing for sales orders as well. Oh, sorry, production orders. Okay, so this will raise purchase orders and production orders. Okay, so let's now look at how we do production issues and receipts from within. So production issues and receipts, as well as time capture. There's essentially three interfaces for doing this. So the first one being doing it through BEAS inside the FAT client. So if I go into a work order, and if I just find the one that we just had created before, I mean, I can very easily go in here and go right click and say receipt the product, issue the material, right? I can do that. Collective receipt, and then I've got further down issue as well. So if I just take the option of saying I'm going to do a issue, then I can go in and select individual resources and say how many I'm issuing for each one. So that's sort of doing it one at a time. I can do the same thing on the receipt as well. I can go in, right click in receipt, and then likewise I say what position am I receipting against, and complete the production process like so. But the other thing you can also do is from within here, you could do a backflash. So you can go in and in here, you can go in and say, I want to do work order backflashing booking, right? Now, from here, I can select the work order that I want to backflash. I can say the quantity I'm producing, what the date is, And then if it's if I'm fully completing the production, I could have done the full completion, or I can go partially complete. And then I get this screen where it's asking, well, what raw materials have you used, right? And depending on whether the raw material is serial tracked or batch tracked, you might see some additional information. So um, in this case, none of these items have got serial numbers, so or batch numbers. So we're just seeing standard product and quantities. I can go in and update those quantities and create the production issue. So that's one way of doing it. Now, you could also just create a reservation, go through a picking process. All of that is also possible. The other way of doing this is through the terminal. So if you go into the terminal, you can log in, and then you got the work order backflushing booking. It's the same. It's a similar screen now. You go in, you select the product, and then you can do a full completion or a partial completion. Of course, you need the quantity once more. And then we got the same sort of an interface where you go in and record the individual quantities. What you can also do on here is record, there's quite a few different things you can do, including you can log into a work order. So you can go and say, I'm logging into a work order. Now here you see this is asking for a barcode now. So that's the barcode we saw on the job traveler. You can also spot the same barcode. If I just go into the route position in question, and if I look at the extended, there's the barcode. So if I just grab that, come in here and scan that barcode, well, there it is. That's the machine I want to log into. So I just say log in, and now I'm sort of working on that particular machine. And once I've finished what I'm doing on that machine, I can come in and log off the machine as well. Once again, I scan the barcode, and then it's sort of saying to me, well, how many did you make? And it's also going to automatically calculate how long you spent on it. Well, right now we've done it very quickly, but I can go in and sort of say I spent 5 minutes and I made 2 of these, and I go partially complete. So now this is recording the time, and it's also now asking me if I want to record the quantities that were linked to that particular route position. And if I did do that, I can do that and go issue and go on. And now on the terminal, what I've ended up doing is issued the components linked to that position, as well as record some labor hours. So the reason it showed those was these were linked, these 2 items were linked to that route position on this bill of material. So if I refresh this, I now see the issue that we did. Right, the 2 quantities that got issued. And I also see the time recording that we just did. Right, it's issued some time against the job as well. So if I scroll down against the machine, I see the clock on time, the 5 minutes that we had recorded. So that's the second way of recording time as well as materials. And then finally, you can go onto the handheld or the browser-based interface. And from here, you can do the same thing. You can go in and you can log on, log off a work order. You can start and stop a job. And so we're using the same concept. You scroll in, you select, and you say I'm doing production, and you logged on. And then later on, you come in and you log off or stop the job. select the operation, select the machine, select the duration, select the quantity, and click Save. Got probably a posting error somewhere, but that's the same concept. So you can either do it through this. I mean, this is obviously designed for a more mobile look. You can do a lot more in here. You can do picking. You can do purchase receipts. You can do backflashing. You can do QC checks and all of those good stuff. So from here, let's move on to talking about the QC elements of the system. So the way the QC works is once you've recorded the production, or if it's based on a routing, what it'll do is automatically in the background it'll create a QC order. Right. So if I go into quality control QC orders, there'll be a bunch of QC orders sitting there waiting to be recorded. And then I can go in and input by test or input by sample. I go in, record the test value, update, and that'll then, pass, record that as passed. And likewise, I do the same on the weight. I can say, well, it's between 15 and 18. I ended up weighing it as 16 kilos. And that'll then pass that particular sample as well. So these QC orders, once again, can be accessible from the terminal here via QC orders, or they can also be done via the web interface. Okay, so we're just going to have a look at advanced planning and scheduling now as the final topic. So let's go in and look at how the planning works. So under capacity planning, if you go into the APS, and let's look at the APS view. So what this shows us is all the open production orders that are in the system. And then I can sort of go in and say, well, I want to sort of reschedule them, or if they haven't been scheduled, I want to schedule them, go in and sort of mark them all to start from today onwards. And then I say, well, calculate this for me. And then the system will go through, based on the calculation definitions. In this case, I'm saying calculate forward. You can also calculate based on backwards or simulation or forward with material. There's quite a few options here. And it's sort of worked out when various things are going to get done. There's the start date, end date, in the start date for the various and end dates for the various orders that are in the system. Then I can go in and look at that information in a graphical view as well. And that shows me all the production orders and all the routings. I can click on a particular route and I can see, what all the different orders are against this, when are they happening, what the capacity is of that particular resource. And as I select on different resources, I see different views of different resources and loads. I can also go in and view resources, individual resources, as well as the utilize and then the jobs against individual resources. From this screen here, I can also reschedule things. I can go in and highlight the orders that I want to move, and I can move them, and I can and then I can recalculate things, and then based on what I've moved around, it'll try and slot and reposition other orders that are already in there. Right, so that's your advanced planning and scheduling. if we go back and look at, there's also rough cut planning available without the APS. You can go in and just look at, you know, the planning of a resource and what load is on a resource there, based on dates and times. So you can see different information around a resource and the loads on it. That concludes what we were planning to cover in the session today. Below are the contact people you can reach out to if you do have any questions.